You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is June 27th, 2024. It's 7:35 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I thought that I would talk a little bit about attachment and how it manifests and the relationship between personal relationships and work relationships. I think it's an important distinction. Attachment, of course, affects all aspects of life. And so you would expect it to manifest in personal relationships and then also in work relationships. And then there are tendencies based on what the attachment strategy is to seek different kinds of positions. And so it can be useful to look at that. The main difference between intimate personal relationships and business relationships or work relationships is that the agreements are different or can be different. You, of course, can have personal relationships with people that you work with, but the essential contract for work relationships is the agreement that you make in terms of providing labor for the company that or the person that you work for. And it's useful to have those agreements explicit so you know what the territory is. And then your obligation in working is to provide what you've agreed to provide. This often excludes aspects that in personal relationships we would look for. So you might say that personal relationships were looking to move into a place of security and into a place of collaboration, but that might not be true in a business relationship, which tends to be more transactional. It's not that there's something fundamentally wrong with transactional relationships in work. That seems to be fine. It's just that if you have the expectation that personal needs should be met in the work environment and you haven't an explicit agreement where that will happen, then it becomes usually a disappointing experience. There is also a sense of competition. In professional relationships, we are often competing for scarce positions or resources within the workplace. And so that competition can create conflict. And so then we're looking at how competition and conflict relates to attachment strategy. Secure people tend to be able to collaborate pretty well, and they tend to be able to communicate authentically pretty well. And so in a secure work environment, collaboration and authentic communication would be something that was valued. And so that is really looking more like a team environment than individual environment. The team takes on a task and collaborates, and people bring the resources that they have to the adventure in attempting to solve the difficulties that are being faced or the tasks that are being assigned. In hierarchical business structures, that may be less required in terms of what needs to happen. There's lots of different roles in business and in labor, management, relationships. One of the things that is apparent in terms of how the attachment distribution works outside of the secure space where collaboration is pretty well developed in individuals is in the insecure space of dismissing and preoccupied people. Dismissing people can also explore very well, but preoccupied people are inhibited in their exploration, and so they would be less likely to be in a position of directing exploration for a team in business or for a business itself, and more likely to be in the position of supporting somebody else's exploration, which is a natural kind of fit. Because dismissing people don't feel emotionally, they tend to be better at withstanding competition and conflict because they don't really react to it in that way. And they get very focused on their point of view and the things that they would like to see happen. And so they can direct that. They tend to have an inflated sense of themselves, and so they value their opinion and can stick to it in a way and direct things, and then elicit the support of preoccupied people in order to support that effort. So they have no problem with getting preoccupied people to adapt to the things that they want to do, the direction that they want to go. So you often see in companies at the very high level or the director level of the business, you have dismissing people. And then in the next rungs down, you have preoccupied people that are supporting that vision. We often talk about this in terms of primary and secondary exploration. In primary exploration, the activity itself provides a sense of meaning in life. And in secondary exploration, what we're doing is gathering time, energy, and resources so that we can have them available for to support our primary exploration. If you, depending on what your primary exploration is and where you derive meaning in life, remuneration varies quite a bit. We tend to reward things that can be popularized in the media that we have, and the small appreciations over a vast network of people tends to produce a lot of resources. Culturally, these things are defined, but it isn't always a good cultural fit for the things that have meaning. And you may find that the primary source of meaning that you derive in the world is not highly valued in our culture and is not highly rewarded in our culture. And then you're likely to face this mix of primary exploration supported by secondary exploration. And that secondary exploration is going to be putting you in places where you need to mostly trade your time and energy for some kind of compensation. I don't know that our culture is that good at helping people understand the things that they want, or understand the way to find meaningfulness in life. and a way to carry on that activity and to help people provide resources for that. But the balance is essential because without that essential meaning that's derived from the primary exploration, often the secondary exploration can become onerous or burdensome, sapping all of the energy that we have for life to work on the gathering of resources that don't, in a way, provide much meaning, and so despair can set in. But in order to make that a process of secondary exploration work well, we need to be able to understand what the agreements are, what the resources we're trading for the remuneration, our personal energy, our personal competence and skill, our time, and then understanding how to engage in the work relationship in such a way that we come out of it with the resources that we need actually to pursue primary exploration. I think that that's really the main balance. It's complex in the way that our culture is, because often the requirements of work don't line up so well with our personal ethics, and also with a way that's sustainable for all of us. We live in this time now with the oscillations between left and right politically, and the movement of the contraction and expansion, which is complicated now by climate change in a way that we really haven't, as a civilization as vast as ours is now, had to contemplate in terms of the effects of it. What happens when the work that's available to you is also work that is, in some sense, harmful to the collective of us? And what do you do about that? We also live in a time of unprecedented inequality. And so the distribution of resources is mind-bogglingly uneven. And to add to that, the advent of artificial intelligence, as it's so called, it's not really intelligent, but it's certainly massive computer processing, and how that's going to affect the way that we engage in secondary exploration in the pursuit of primary exploration. It is a wonderful time to consider that with a rebalancing of resources and the use of technology to free us up from a lot of the more mundane aspects of secondary exploration, we could come into a flowering of amazing access to time and resources to pursue the things that are meaningful to us, and open up a cultural moment that also is unprecedented, really, in terms of what might happen. I tend to be doubtful of that in the current political climate. I might even say I was completely hopeless about it, and be comfortable with that. Not that there aren't abundant solutions to these difficulties. There certainly are. It's that the political will is not there to change And there's an amount of anger that is also at least more than I've experienced in my lifetime. So you go into the workplace and you notice that there's an avoidant quality to the people that are in charge, and that lends itself to uh, taking on those positions and surviving in that level of competition. And you apply yourself in supporting the endeavors as defined by the purpose of the company. And in smaller companies, where you can really know the people that you're working with and what you're doing, let's say a bit smaller than 150 people. And this is looking at the research of Robin Dunbar, the British scientist who uh, evaluated how many faces, 3D faces, a mind can recognize, whether there was a physical limit for that. And the number he arrived at was around 150. In these smaller organizations where you really have a sense of everybody and a sense of the purpose of the company and the direction, the involvement in that support of it is more direct. When we get into these vast companies of tens of thousands of employees, it's harder to have a sense of impact either on the company or on the culture or the environment. What are the agreements that you make, and what is the reward that you get for providing those services as a kind of transactional basis for a relationship? And that mainly is the business environment. So how do you survive in a transactional relational system? Secure people, of course, can collaborate, but there's no reason why you can't effectively learn a collaborative system. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't learn a transactional system in a different kind of work environment where the team effort is what matters, and the contribution of skills in pursuing the goal, which is more collaborative. If you have uh, don't have the skill for that, it's much harder to be able to show up in that way. And so you may encounter bottlenecks or problems in the work environment that you're in if you require collaboration, but you don't have people who are capable of collaboration. Or you may notice in yourself that the conflicts that come up in the work environment really are related to your capacity for collaboration. If you were transactional, maybe finding it very hard to even show up in a responsive way if you're in the disorganized end of things. Disorganized people have reliability problems that often preclude them advancing to. If you find that you have insecure attachment and you're transactionally based and you need to begin to develop the skills of collaboration, this is again the attachment repair that we're looking at to begin to train yourself to be able to do that. This is trainable, of course. These are skills that can be learned. It isn't that there's a deficit of capacity, really, but an absence of training. One of the things about dismissing people is they're very self-oriented and they're very uh, lacking in spontaneity, really. They're very internally oriented. They don't take on information very well. and they're very cerebral, very cognitively oriented. It's one of the ways that you begin to spot them in the workplace. They have a point of view, a worldview, and they actually expect compliance to the worldview. They don't adapt or are unpersuaded. But also, in some sense, they're pliant. So in hierarchies, if the pressure is or the direction is coming from above, it's easy for them to be compliant in that. Preoccupied people are very spontaneous, but not particularly monitoring. They're very outwardly focused, externally focused, and they're quite emotional, whereas dismissing people are not emotional particularly. And so they're very good at supporting, but not very good at leading. And they're also, in some sense, oppositional. They like to find problems and present problems. And they prefer unsolvable problems because it takes more attention. It brings more attention to themselves. So in the work environment, you may notice the people that are bringing up the problems all the time without finding solutions to it, and who may even be resisting the direction that you're going in, are going to be more on the preoccupied side. So this is then a question of navigation, really. How do you navigate working with people that are not necessarily collaborative? Collaborative people are easier to work with. They're also direct. They have a tendency to be authentic in their exchanges, so you know where you stand. You can make those adjustments and participate in the way that you need to. When your management is on the dismissing side of things, in some sense, you have to go along with their direction because there isn't room for anything. And so when you make the agreements, you make them clearly in terms of what you're doing and not doing, and stick to the script. Tends to be the way to go. With preoccupied people, you can't rely on them to pick a direction and to solve problems. But as team members, they're often able to contribute really well because they like to be in the mix and participating. I know that in our culture at the moment, there's a kind of vilifying, if you will, of dismissing people, or narcissistic people is often the term that we use for them. But I tend to look at it from a more neutral collection of skills and ways that people operate. And really, in the work environment, mainly, you're needing to adapt to the skill set of the people around you, and in understanding that and working with the people that are there, achieve the things that you were setting out to do, rather than burning up too much energy and outrage at the way that people behave, particularly if you have no influence on the hiring and firing of different people. Come together in this compassionate way of thinking about it. We take care of the people that are around us, take care of the people that we have contact with and influence with. And in the work environment, of course, when you join a pre-existing work environment, you are joining a group of people, and we then need to operate also in the group level. Group dynamics are very depending on how many people there are. Small groups, middle groups, big groups, personal groups. Dunbar also researched those dynamics, and the small group for females is one-on-one, and the small group for males is 3 people. Somehow makes it more comfortable. I as a gay man, often think, well, it's that influence on the male side is around homophobia. That you want closeness, but you also want limit closeness. But that may just be cynicism. Small groups within a larger group. And how is that managed? Can you find allies, which I think is essential in the work environment? And with that small group and the allies that you have, moving over the boundary into a more personal dynamic, so that you have a sense of being seen as an individual and cared for as an individual beyond just the role that you have in the workplace, so that you have the capacity for, or at least the access to somebody who can be helpful to emotionally regulate you in the work environment that can be challenging. If you don't have that, you don't find anybody that you can relate to across that purely professional line. But that tends to be a smaller group or individuals which you hold, and then participate in the medium group or the larger groups. This making sense? It is perfectly reasonable to assume that the tasks that you do at work have the capacity to emotionally dysregulate you. And so part of this is going to be able to, part of your capacity to survive and thrive in a work environment is access to that emotional regulation piece. All of this being said about secondary exploration, the purpose of which is to gather the time, energy, and resources to engage in primary exploration. The way that our work life is mainly set up with the 48 hours or 38 hours, 40 hours or 38 hours of employment without spaces where primary exploration can be included, can truncate the primary exploration, because we don't have space in terms of time each day to engage in the primary exploration. And so you notice some people engage in that for the hours before work or in the hours after work. But if the secondary exploration is demanding enough that you don't have the energy resources to do that, it can gradually truncate the primary exploration. So we're also looking for a kind of balance in the relationship to our secondary exploration. Where can we put the 2 hours a day that we need to be engaged in primary exploration so that our life is buoyant with a sense of meaningfulness, which makes the time and energy spent on the secondary exploration easy. When we begin to restrict or lose our capacity for primary exploration, the secondary exploration can take on this despairing quality, this hopeless quality, really this sort of dead endness. And then we have the weekends or we have the vacation time. It's very difficult to find enough meaning in the weekend time or in the vacation time that would be enough to lift up a life. So I think that part of this is really looking at the structure of the secondary exploration at the beginning of it as you're entering into agreements about it and finding a way that you are able to do that. I think that popularly in our culture, there's the idea that family and children should provide that meaning, but it's a terrible burden to put on a child that they're required to provide for you the meaningfulness in your life. Close relationships are really meant to support you so that you can engage in exploration. And the adding of children to that mix is, in some sense, because you've figured it out, and then you offer that as a education and support to your children so that they also will develop the capacity to do that. The restriction of resources and the lopsidedness of resources has meant that a huge majority of the population is under extreme strain around caring for children. That's what you want in your life. And I think that the gutting of the public education system, the gutting of the resources that are available for children is in the end going to be so counterproductive for our society. And I hope that we recognize it in time, that we can then turn that around, because the consequences will be terrible beyond what they already are. So if you haven't contended with this idea of primary exploration, part of this is going to be also the opening of the imagination, that you can begin to discover what it is that's meaningful and what isn't, and organize your life in such a way that it's the thing that you do, the thing that makes sense to you to do, the thing that floats everything. One of the ways that this is possible is through the development of mentalizing and emotional regulation. Mentalizing is really where you're able to track all of this fast enough to understand what's happening in the present moment, what meaning you've assigned it and why you've assigned it, and then what you might like to express about that. Also understanding that in a relationship to other people, you need to express what you want to say in a way that they're likely to understand what you mean. So there's a kind of transliteration that happens in the formulation of the expression. And then if the mentalizing is good, you make the expression and you monitor their response to it so that you understand their reaction to what it is that you wanted to communicate. And they then in turn can understand your reaction. So you understand what it is you want to communicate, you understand how to communicate it so that you'll be understood, you see the reaction to the communication, and then you modify your understanding of the situation. That would be a description of good mentalizing. And then the emotional regulation piece, of course, is that you can tolerate the intensity of emotion that arises in these kinds of conversations, these kinds of dialogues. This is particularly important in the work environment, that you're able to communicate and to understand the communication that's coming at you so that you can modify your responses in the workplace. Also, obviously, important in interpersonal relationships, but also in the workplace. Sometimes we can get into conflict where we have our point of view and other point of views, and the process of negotiating those. Dismissing people, of course, don't really negotiate their point of view. It's their point of view. And so that there's the adaptation to that. If they're in a senior role to yours, if you're in a peer role, then you need to figure out a way to be in relationship while that's happening. And if they're subordinate to you in work, how to get them to go along. Mostly in subordinate positions, dismissing people tend to be compliant. And then with preoccupied people, getting them to go along and overcoming the resistance, which they tend to be more organized around. So this is a meditation group, and so I like to talk about solutions to these kinds of situations with using meditation as a way of understanding the mentalizing aspect, and then also the emotional regulation aspect. We need to be able to monitor our thoughts and understand what actually is what it is that we're thinking, what meaning that we're assigning to things. We don't really operate in a understanding of what's happening. We operate in realities of meaning that we've assigned to what's happening. And so our position is really to watch the process of the body-mind assign meaning to what's happening, so that we have the chance of evaluating whether the meaning, the automatic meaning response that we're giving to the present moment is an accurate reflection or a skillful reflection, or is it an unskillful reflection that we would then need to modify so that we can be more effective. And so that I like to do with a meditation strategy called investigating self-generated emotion, which is where you monitor the thought process. The thought process, the thinking, the visual and auditory thinking are linked to the feelings in the body, the emotional response in the body. So it's important also to be able to track the auditory and visual thinking and its reactivity with the emotional body, the sensations in the body, which we identify as emotional. So I think that we'll do some meditation now, and I'll take you through that process so that you can watch it, develop that capacity to mentalize what reality that you're making, what meaning you're assigning, and also the feeling states that arise in response to that. We'll begin with a little bit of concentration practice to settle the mind. So go ahead and take your meditation posture. All right, let go of the meditation. Comments or questions about the meditation? So looking at the calendar, we have a meditation and addiction level 1 starting on Saturday, which will run for the next 3 Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. We'll go over the 4 modules of our program, which the first one is craving and urging. The second one is stress, anger, and depression. The third is difficult interpersonal persistent negative emotions. And the third one is difficult interpersonal relationships. We look at this as a meditation-based, attachment-focused relapse prevention program for people who have substance or process addictions. We talk about all of that. We don't really make much of a distinction between the substances and processes. We have, starting in August, a level 2 on Tuesday afternoons from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and that is our 6-month-long course in really doing a deep dive into attachment. The course is offered with mentoring sessions and without mentoring sessions. The mentoring sessions of that class are full. But there is still enrollment available without mentoring. Most people are using mentoring these days for individual ideal parent figure protocol sessions. We do have a level 2 meditation and attachment starting in September, and that's from 10:30 to 12:30, so 10:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Pacific time on Fridays every other week. That one, there are spaces left for the mentoring if you're interested in that, as well as the rest of the class. We're going to start on July 29th, a meditation and addiction level 2 class, which we haven't done in this context before. This is a class that I used to teach in different rehabs for people with addiction and or mental health issues. And we're doing this as a 12-week intensive. So there'll be 3 sessions per week from 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific time, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, to go over the 4 modules of our program in a deep way. The Monday class will be didactic. The Wednesday class will be meditation instruction, and the Friday class will be processing to make sure that the understanding of what we're teaching is well integrated. So take a look at that. I'm excited about that because I think that for post-acute addiction treatment, there isn't a lot out there, and this is really focused mainly on relapse prevention so that you can stabilize your abstinence or harm reduction plan and really carry it into the long-term future. I think that's pretty much everything that we have coming up in the next little bit. I offer this teaching freely, but I do hope that you'll support us if you can through a donation. There is a link for the donation on the website. If you go to the main page and hit the donate button, it'll bring up the page. Any amount is appreciated, really. It helps support me and also the work that we're doing. Really appreciate your practice. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you soon, I hope. Bye-bye.